Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you all today. Again, my name is Ongeleke Turner, presenting on NIL education and mental health, navigating opportunity and pressure here at the Youth Athlete Summit. Hope you all are staying warm, especially if you're in a cold state like me. It is -9 degrees in Michigan today. So, yeah, it's pretty cold. All right, so let us get started. All right. Oh, what is NIL? So it's name, image, and likeness. That means your identity, your personal brand, your representation of yourself, if you will. And it is something that does give permission to optimize opportunity. So, in order to understand NIL as we see it today in its ever changing, constantly evolving state, I think it is important to kind of examine a little bit of the history and what preceded you in order to kind of understand where we are today and how we got here. So, let's take a look at how do we get here. So, you see here, I have some categories and some images. So we'll start with stakeholders. And I intentionally chose the group of student athletes as the image to represent stakeholders because the student athletes or the youth athletes are one of the most important stakeholders when you're talking about NIL. So stakeholders are individuals or groups who benefit from influence or are affected by college or youth sports. So the stakeholders basically include anyone who has something to gain or lose in sports. And this can include schools, this can include conferences, media, sponsors, coaches, administrators, families, and of course, the student athletes. And again, I state that the student athletes are one of the biggest and most important stakeholders here when we're talking about NIL. So we're moving on to antitrust. Antitrust laws are laws that prevent organizations from unfairly controlling markets or limiting competition. So antitrust laws basically exist to stop powerful organizations from creating unfair rules that limit choice and limit competition. So basically, in sports, antitrust became important when the courts began to question whether or not athletes were being unfairly restricted from earning benefits related to their education and their identity. All right, so moving on to amateurism, which basically is the traditional idea that athletes should compete for education and experience and not pay. So for many years, this was the idea that was used to justify limiting what athletes could earn, despite like schools and conferences, organizations being able to make significant revenue. And with the NIL era, it basically challenges how amateurism has been applied, especially when athletes' identities are used in ways that make money. So it's not to say that amateurism means that student athletes or youth athletes are not still competing at amateur levels, meaning not professional. It just unrestricts them being able to make earnings now while competing at the amateur level of sport. All right, so I skipped ruling. So these are court decisions that impact the NIL era that we see today, in which here we have the three significant cases: O'Bannon versus NCAA, Alston versus NCAA, and House versus NCAA. So the asterisk next to Alston just indicates that this was a case that was escalated to the Supreme Court, which we know is the highest level of ruling in the US justice system. So for the purposes of time, I won't go into these three cases as I intended to, but at the end, I do have them listed. If you would like to further look them up, the references are there. All right, so why this conversation matters. NIL is changing and it's impacting sports at all levels, especially youth and collegiate levels. So that means that pressure is reaching athletes earlier, that education helps to protect the athletes' futures. So basically, mental health matters now, not later. If we wait until, we're trying to build the plane and fly it at the same time, we're kind of past the point. So that's why it's important to have these discussions and have a space like this to kind of talk about and present education and some tips surrounding the conversation. So this double-edged sword is presented. You have pressure behind the spotlight because NIL does bring financial opportunity, but also intense pressure to perform, to maintain brand image, balance academics simultaneously. So there's a celebratory period where, there's deal signings, there's brand building, there's an opportunity to gain some financial independence and also public recognition. But there's also a period of struggle, which can look like burnout, anxiety, public scrutiny, you know, performance critiques, and identity pressures. So we want to talk a little bit about like what influences NIL opportunities. So some of the consensus is sport popularity and media coverage. Also level of competition and visibility. You have social media presence. You also have brand alignment and marketability and timing and location. So I want to take a minute to touch on, NIL opportunities usually come from a combination of like multiple different factors working together simultaneously. And which ones matter the most depends on the sport. It depends on the market of that sport, timing, and also the individual athlete. So you could have two athletes do, everything quote unquote right, whatever that looks like, and still their opportunities could look very different. So there's also, moving along to my next slide, some gender differences. Um, so what the research tends to indicate is that with women, on top of being a good performer in their sport or having talent, the branding and the visibility is also very important when you're looking at women and their NIL deals and expectations. And men, not to say that they don't have the branding and visibility demands as well, but there tends to be performance driven. So both face immense pressure. It just manifests in different ways. And if an opportunity kind of feels uneven, it doesn't mean a personal failure. That's just kind of how systems work, what we've learned about systems and how they work. And so I think that understanding these factors does help us to shift from comparison. Comparison is really the thief of joy. It will snatch all of the joy right out of you if you let it. But having this understanding, this education, I think helps to provide some clarity. And with that clarity, we can kind of shift some of this pressure towards protection. Okay, so some of the mental health realities and what youth athletes face: burnout, physical and emotional exhaustion from overtraining. And it's not just about overtraining in terms of training for or at their sport. It turns into, having the additional expectations and demands where you put NIL expectations on top of the physical training for their sport and being a student athlete and being a whole human and all of the things. So that can lead to just complete and physical emotional depletion. Um, Anxiety, constant worry about performance or public perception, depression, persistent sadness affecting motivation and joy, and isolation, feeling disconnected from peers and also what quote unquote normal life is due to being pulled in, so many different directions. And we do have some warning signs. withdrawal, isolation, irritability, negative self-talk, changes in sleep and appetite, and also declining performance. So those are some of the warning signs, just some of many, but some key indicators to look out for. All right, so practical tips for managing NIL. We want to master time management. And these practical tips are not just about NIL. These are, life and wellness tips that are going to take you far beyond sport. But time management is going to be something that is going to be a game changer. If you can make sure you're giving yourself enough time, to complete tasks, enough time to complete your studies, making sure you're scheduling in things, even if you have to schedule in things like a nap in between sessions, you might have to do that just to make sure that you have some feasible goals that you're able to attain and also stay on top of and being timely. And you want to set social media boundaries. This is about just protecting oneself from just too much exposure to things that could be potentially damaging to your mental negativity that could be, on the internet, and also any triggers for comparison. So just having some self-awareness, being able to know like maybe it's time to take a break or put this down for a little bit is something that is a good practical tip to start to implement. Making sure to prioritize rest and nutrition, have to feel your body well, and also give it enough time to recover. And then we have scheduling mental health check-ins. We have our little wellness wheel here. This is just about holistic wellness, and it doesn't mean anything is wrong. As Alicia mentioned in her previous presentation, checking in, making sure you're good. Are your needs being met? Having identified supporters who you can safely have space to kind of discuss, I'm feeling good or I'm not feeling so good. So making sure to have those check-ins. All right, so here's some strategies for navigating NIL. So we want to embrace opportunity. If an opportunity is for you, it's for you, but we want to be able to pursue it with care and confidence. Prioritizing mental health. Again, mental health is your lifeline for holistic well-being. Being mentally well extends far beyond sport. This is about your whole life as a human being. And building your whole self. You are more than your sport. And sometimes that's difficult because we know that athletic identities are so intertwined and they're a big part of our lives. But making sure to understand and make time for those things that you do enjoy outside of sport, whether they be different hobbies or things like that, just making sure that, maybe in season, you can't always do those things, but being able to circle back and not forget about those other parts of you when time does permit. You want to prioritize education. Your foundation is education is your foundation far beyond sport, and education should not be a sacrifice in terms of NIL opportunities or deals. And then prioritizing organization, building a sustainable and realistic schedule that is inclusive to your human needs and also your student athlete needs. So human first, student athlete second is the motto that we want to prioritize, and making sure that we're organizing ourselves appropriately to kind of be able to fit in all of those needs and demands. And then you want to identify your support. You never want to navigate something as complex as NIL alone. Um, it's changing probably as we sit here and speak right now. There's constantly updates, there's constantly something new. So you just want to make sure you have support and a team of individuals who you can trust and have your best interest at heart when you're navigating these complexities. Okay, so youth NIL playbook. Age does not equal readiness. NIL has extended into youth sports, and being eligible doesn't mean that you're ready. And adult guidance is essential. So I do have a QR code here in the right-hand corner. And this is a playbook written specifically for youth athletes. So it is not about how to make money. It's about how to protect your education, protect your mental health, and your identity as you grow and develop as a human being and as a youth athlete. So I'll give you a minute to scan that if you would like to. Basically, it just includes some helpful hints, nothing that you have to master today, but it's something that you can take with you and just tap into, if and when the time comes where you need to revisit these tips. All right, so we have our parent, guardian, and our coach tips for supporting the navigation of NIL. So guidance over acceleration. You want to protect development. And when we say development, um, here we're talking more about the emotional and mental development. We know that the physical development is going to come. They're going to get that development within their training and regimen for sport, but we want to make sure that we're protecting the emotional and mental development of our young athletes. We want to monitor pressure and, of course, support their mental health. So the QR code is here as well for our parent, guardian, coach tips for supporting navigation of NIL. And this just addresses readiness, development, mental health, and how to guide without rushing or over accelerating. Guidance isn't to run interference or to be interference, but it's more so to be a protective factor. Okay, so here we have a video that I think is just so spot on for kind of where we are today with sports. He touches on the transfer portal, NIL, and kind of all of these different things that we're seeing today. So this is Tom Brady, and I know Tom Brady is like an older athlete. However, I figure everybody should know Tom Brady. He's Tom Brady, right? So, football player who played for the University of Michigan here at my home state, but he wasn't a star. He had to compete for playing time. And, he was drafted in the sixth round of the NFL draft. So that means that multiple teams passed on him multiple times. And, he went on to play 23 seasons in the NFL, won 7 championships and multiple MVP awards. He became known for his discipline, his preparation, and leadership, and not just talent. So he retired as one of the longest active, most successful quarterbacks in NFL league history. And the thing about his career is that it wasn't built on being like the most hyped up early on, but it was built on development, guidance, and long-term decision making. And with that being said, he's been able to have so much success within his playing days, but build that success to transition beyond sport as he has different business ventures, but is also an NFL broadcaster for Fox Sports. So let's take a listen to what he has to say. Oh no. All right, give me a second.
Would Tom Brady have finished his career at Michigan if the rules were the same then as they are now?
It's such a hypothetical situation. The only thing I can answer is to say that based on what my experience was, I wouldn't want it any other way. My college experience was very challenging. It was very competitive. The lessons I learned in college, certainly about competition, those traits transformed my life as a professional. I was ready to compete against anybody because the competition in college toughened me up so much that I had a self-belief and self-confidence in myself that whatever was I was faced, I could overcome that. And I think if we take that away from a young student athlete to say, you know what, I know it's tough to compete, but what we're going to do before you have to compete, we're actually going to put you somewhere else so that you don't have to compete. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do to a young child. I would challenge all the coaches and all the parents. They're the ones that have to guide these kids. You can't expect a 17 or 18-year-old to make these great decisions. They're young. They don't have life experience. It should be the parents. Be a good parent. Teach your kid the right values. What's going to sustain them in their careers over a period of time? Whether it's football or whether it's business or whether it's teaching or law school or medical school or a trade, whatever you want to do, you're going to have to go through hard things in your life. You're going to have to make tough choices. And the value isn't always about the last dollar. So I think all these things that are happening in college sports, we're prioritizing the wrong things. We're valuing the wrong things. And I'm not saying it's not important. It's one of 10 things that are important.
Yeah.
And certainly to me, it's not the most important. So when kids do go through that the right way, they're actually learning the right values.
Yeah.
And when you have the right values in life, that's going to sustain you as you move on through the rest of your life.
All right. So I think that this is so important to just bring us back to the basics. And what I mean by the basics is in a world where NIL, got to get this, got to do that, that's so sped up. And if we slow down a little bit and just stick to the basics sometime, I think that no matter what the world around you tries to convince you, that there are different avenues to achieve the same goal. And to this point, the old ways do still work. So just to keep that in mind as you grow and as you develop. NIL is not the only way. It is a great way and it's a great avenue, but you know, some of the old school practices and ways of progression do still work. Okay, so I have some references here that I have just kind of jotted just to give you some indication of kind of what I use to gather some of my data. And I also have a QR code if anyone is interested in my extended references. Now, I did not put them in APA format, but they are there if you would like to scan and kind of take a look at some of the articles and other material that I utilized for this presentation today. All right. Technology is not being nice today. I'm almost done. All right, there's me. My name is Ongeleke Turner, licensed clinical social worker. I am licensed in the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania. I'm a native Detroiter, and I still live in my hometown, Detroit, Michigan. In 2023, I intentionally started No Flag, No Foul LLC because I am a fan, but I'm also a licensed clinical social worker and have the skills to impact a group of individuals that I am very passionate about. And it took me to see some representation of seeing other people who looked like me thriving in those spaces that kind of gave me the oh, okay, I can do this. So I intentionally started my practice to help to just positively impact so much of the pathology that I was seeing in sport as being a fan. Um, I am a member of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sport, and also I serve on the executive board of the Black Sports Professionals Detroit chapter. I do have my QR code here. If you like to scan it, you can get my contact information. Just in case we don't have time for questions, you can please reach out to me if there's something I can do to clarify or help you on your journey or just, you know, anything. I'm pretty approachable and responsive. So you can scan that code and access my contact information. Thank you.